Hey everybody, I'm glad you're here. Today we're going to do something a little bit different, something I haven't done on my channel before, but something that I feel very passionately about and want to talk more about, want to share with you guys about, and that is money and budgeting. My money budgeting system is very different from a lot of the standard money budgeting systems that are out there. It's one that I developed for myself based on a lot of experience and a lot of practice. I figured out a budget that works for me. It's kind of hands off and it works for me with my incredibly varied income and incredibly varied expenses. So I just want to share it with you guys and give you a little preview about how I do what I do, why I do what I do, how and why it works for me, just in case it works for somebody else out there as well who maybe has tried all of the other, big name budgeting programs and hasn't really found a good match yet. So, all the disclaimers: I'm not a financial professional, I'm not selling anything, you shouldn't listen to me when it comes to money advice. This is just my experience and what works for me. I am a continual student of money and investing and being a good steward of money. And this is what works for me now and what's worked for me for the last year or so. So yeah, might as well share it. I love watching budgeting videos and financial videos. And because I'm trying to level up my own personal financial situation, I figured I might as well share with y'all what I'm up to in case you guys have any good ideas you want to share with me, or maybe just in case my system works for somebody else out there whose income and expenses are just as varied as mine are. I don't know what I'm going to make every month. I don't know what I'm going to make every week. I don't know what I'm going to make ever. And I don't really know what I'm going to spend, save for a few monthly expenses that come out every month anyway that I will share more about. And so none of those basic systems worked for me where it was like, you know how much money's coming in and you need to assign it a role right away or whatever. Like that just never really worked for me because my money it comes in very randomly and from random sources and in random amounts. And that's just kind of the nature of my business and being self-employed and all of that. So if you don't know who I am and you haven't been following this channel and you don't know anything about my story, it might help to know a little bit about my lifestyle and why my income is so varied and why my expenses are so varied. I am an entrepreneur. I'm self-employed. I do freelance, contract, gig work, random jobs. I've also been living in a van for over 2 years now, and so my monthly expenses are a lot different from most people's who have rent or a mortgage or something like that due every month. Because my lifestyle doesn't require me to spend a lot of money, it also doesn't require me to make a lot of money, and I do pursue a lifestyle that allows me the freedom of building my own business in whatever way I see fit. And so that means that my income varies quite a bit. In the effort of being more deliberate with my finances and sharing them with you guys, why don't we get started with talking about my budgeting system, and I'll show you how I keep track of it by hand, and I'll show you how I do that in my bullet journal. So let's just get started there and see what happens next. So what I do for each spread is count off 7 equal size columns, and then I put the names of each column at the top: notes, checking, PayPal, Venmo, tithe, taxes, investment / savings. So this is what the spread looks like when it's done. I always do 2 full pages at a time because I go through it kind of quickly. And they all have the same categories at the top. Notes, so I can just say like grocery or income or whatever. And then I have 3 main accounts that income comes into, and that is my checking account, my PayPal, and my Venmo. And I like to have money in all 3 of them because I use all of them to pay for different things. So I don't necessarily want all of my money coming in through PayPal, Venmo, or checking and all going into my checking and then all coming out of my checking, because I do use PayPal and Venmo separately to pay for different things. So they all have their own categories on this spreadsheet. And then the next 3 items are my 3 most important expenses that come out of every piece of income that comes in. And that would be my tithe, my taxes, and my investments/savings. My tithe is always 10%. It's 10% of whatever my income is, regardless. Gross, not net, or net, not gross, whichever one it is before taxes. 10% of all the income I receive goes to my tithe category. 15% of all of the income that I receive goes to my taxes category, and 20% goes to my investments/savings category. So the tithing, taxes, and investment columns kind of act as their own bank accounts, because I add up whatever money comes in here and I will gradually transfer it out as it gets reappointed. But if I'm doing 10, 15, and 20% of any kind of income that comes in, some of those amounts can be pretty small, so I don't necessarily, transfer them to taxes or investments right away. I will wait until there's some kind of more substantial amount. And then when the tithes, taxes, and investments do come out, they'll come out of one of these 3 accounts and be transferred or paid out, depending. And then I will just deduct them from whichever category they come out of over here. All right, let's talk a little bit about each of those 3 accounts: tithe, taxes, and investment/savings. I was always looking for a budgeting process that was percentage based rather than dollar bill based, because my dollar bills vary every month, and by following dollar bill based budgeting, I would just get very overwhelmed. Also because my income comes in fits and spurts. Small amounts all the time, maybe a large amount here and there. Percentages always seemed to make more sense for me and my mindset, the way my brain works, etc. But one of the things that all of the budgeting platforms have to say is that you should always budget your most important things first. And so these 3 are the most important 3 for me: tithing, taxes, and investment/savings. And so I want to go over each of those in a little bit more detail just to make it make more sense for who I am and why it works for me. A lot of people have heard of tithing in a religious or spiritual sense. A lot of families will tithe when they go to church or something of that nature. I'm not religious. I don't go to church. That's not why I tithe. For me, tithing is more of a spiritual practice where I am putting energy, literal currency, my dollar bills, towards things that have fed me spiritually, and towards things that I want to see more of in my life. So the way I see it, my tithe is me telling the universe what I want more of. So sometimes that'll be a friend who really lifted me up when I needed them, or an author, or a creator, a podcaster, a YouTuber, somebody who's created something that has really helped me along in my journey, or causes that I know to be doing good things in the world. And so I will send them right off the top 10% of whatever income I receive. This is different than giving a donation or something of that nature. I read a book about the laws of prosperity written by Edwin Gaines, which I will link to in the show notes, and that really helped me hone in on tithing as a spiritual practice and what it means for me. So that's what tithing is. 10% comes off the top of everything immediately. No harm, no foul. The next category is my taxes. So again, I'm a self-employed person. I pay all my own taxes, and I need to save for them ahead of time so that I'm not caught in a lurch when it's time to pay those quarterly or annual taxes. So I used to save 20%, and I found over the last few years that that's a little bit too much for me. So I've started only saving about 15%. So we'll see how that goes this tax season. If it doesn't work, I'll bump it back up to 20%. But right now I'm doing 15%. The final category is investments/savings. And again, this one has evolved over the years. It started as only savings because I really wanted to prioritize building a good, healthy savings account that would get me through 6 months of no income or some kind of substantial emergency. So a lot of the budgeting gurus talk about having an emergency fund. And so I made that part of my automatic deductions from my income every month until I had a savings account that I was comfortable with, and then I transferred that money over into investments. So if I do have to dip into my emergency fund for any reason, I will then transfer back to the 20% going to savings until my emergency fund is back at a level that I like for it to be at. So if you've been following along and doing a little bit of math in your head, you can see that with this process of taking my three most important things out immediately as soon as I get any amount of money whatsoever, I'm taking off about 45% of each dollar that comes in. So then what happens to the rest of that money? What happens to the other 55%? That money goes into whatever account it's in, the checking, the PayPal, or the Venmo, and it goes towards whatever expenses I have. So primary expenses as a van person are gas and groceries, along with a shit ton of insurances. And I also do have a mortgage. I bought a house 7 years ago and I still own it. I rent it out. I've been renting it out almost since the very beginning, which wasn't exactly the intention when I bought the house, but I'm not mad about it now. And so my main monthly expenses are the mortgage, landlady insurance, homeowner's insurance, renter's insurance, car insurance, health insurance, my phone bill, my hotspot plan, a couple of business related expenses, gas and groceries, and that's about it. And so some months I spend a lot more on gas than others. If I'm driving a lot, if I'm traveling a lot, I spend more money on gas. Some months I spend a lot less. I've been traveling really quite slowly the last few months, and so my gas expenses have dwindled pretty consistently. I have a video on my channel about what it costs me personally to live in a van, and I will link to that in the show notes as well, so that you guys can go watch that and get a better idea of what I personally spend. And so the other 55% of my income that doesn't get put into a pre-category like taxes and investment slash savings goes into one big pot that I use to pay for everything else. So for me to make sure that I have enough money for my upcoming expenses, especially those bigger ones that every month are exactly the same and don't change, I'll put it in my ledger ahead of time anyway and deduct it from the amount that is in that checking account at that time. And then as those expenses are withdrawn from my account, I put a little check mark. So every note in the notes category has a check mark as soon as it's actually deducted from my bank account. If there's no check mark by it, it hasn't come out of the bank account yet, but it's at least counted for in my budgeting system, in my tracking system, so that the first of the month doesn't come around and I don't have enough money for all of my bills. I have set it up so that the majority of my bills are taken out within the first 3 days of the month so that they're gone and I don't have to think about them later. And so some months when I have an excess of money, I have some extra that I haven't spent yet, will stay in that account as a kind of savings for the next month in case the next month is a leaner month. A lot of self-employed people talk about the self-employed process as being very feast or famine, and I've found that to be true as well. Some months I do very well, some months I don't do quite as well. So having a little bit of extra padding in my checking account makes me feel a little better as each month goes by. And then also, like I said, pre-counting those expenses that I know are coming out before they're actually withdrawn helps me with the peace of mind of knowing that everything's going to get paid. So the feast months, I save a little bit more, and the famine months, I have that money already ready for me and I don't have to panic. That being said, when I got on the road, I did have a little bit of credit card debt. I do not have credit card debt anymore. I paid for the van in cash as well, so I don't have a car note or anything like that. But when I did have debt that I was paying down, I would use any and all extra money to go towards the debt. I was always paying the minimums, but I wanted to get it paid off as fast as humanly possible. And so anything that was extra or left over, I'd keep half of it, for a famine month, and I'd put half of it towards the credit card or the car note. And so what I want to do moving forward, and as I said at the beginning of the video, I'm trying to deliberately level up my financial situation. I want to pay off my mortgage. I want to pay off my mortgage as fast as humanly possible. And on the budget of somebody who makes as erratic an income as I do, it can be a little bit challenging, but I figured if I put it out here on the YouTubes, maybe y'all could help me find a little extra money here and there, or get creative with paying my bills or some such so that I could pay it off as quickly as possible. So this page, this very blank page, is going to be my mortgage payoff tracking system. So I currently owe my principal balance on my mortgage right now, get ready for some real numbers, is $127,224.46. And so, of course, the banks want me to pay that over the next 23 years, 22 or 3 years, and I want to get it paid off way before then if possible. And so that amount might seem like a whole lot to some, it might seem like nothing to others. I'm trying not to prescribe a feeling to it. This is just the fact. And a lot of people will say that mortgage is not debt, but at the same time, like, this is the only debt that I have, and it is a debt that I owe. And I don't want to sell the house, so I'd rather just pay it off as quickly as I can. So in my bullet journal, I have counted all of the dots and all of the squares on these pages, and I have determined that in the big square that I drew, there are enough little squares that if I color in a square each time I pay off $100 of principal, which is very important because interest is not going towards your principal at all, but for every $100 that I pay off in principal, I will color in one of these squares, and by the time I get to the bottom of the page, by the time it's one big blocked out square, the mortgage will be paid off and the house will be fully mine and not belong to a bank that I'm paying for. So an additional piece of background, I bought the house when I was 23 or 4, and around 25 or 26, I actually got my real estate license, and I was a realtor for 3 years before I moved into the van. And so I do have an understanding of how mortgages work, how the market works, how being a landlady works, how all of this money works. And so a combination of my curiosity and passion for money and my curiosity and passion for houses has been actually a really nice culmination of interests. So I don't know if you guys want to see like a monthly roundup of how many squares I've managed to fill in. My mortgage payment alone every month will pay off at least $200 or $250 of the principal, and of course it goes up incrementally every month. And so every month I'm going to have something to color off, even if it's just 2.5 squares. But I'm hoping that with all of that extra money that I'm not spending on whatever the hell else I'm not spending it on can go to make this process a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker and a little bit quicker. So if you guys want to see like monthly roundups of how many squares I've gotten to fill in that month, let me know. If you want to just see it periodically or when like a row gets crossed off or something or whatever. I'm kind of just putting this out here to be accountable and to share my budgeting process with y'all because it is admittedly a little different and a little wonky, but it works for me. And I think that's the most important thing about any kind of budgeting system is that you need to figure out a system that works for you and that actually works. It needs to work with your lifestyle, it needs to work with your income and your expenses, and it really needs to work with your mindset. So if you want to get better with money, my biggest recommendations are to learn about money, read about money, read the books, listen to the podcasts, watch the YouTubes. Again, whichever works for you. I kind of do all of the above. I've read so many books on money. I will link to as many as I can remember in the show notes, but a few that are on the top of my mind are I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, The Laws of Prosperity, I think it's 4, but I can't remember the exact number, The Laws of Prosperity by Edwene Gaines, The Abundance Code, by Julie Cairns, I believe. You Are a Badass at Making Money by Jen Sincero. Money Master the Game by Tony Robbins. Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey, who is a problematic human being, but that book was actually kind of good, along with a whole host of others. There are also a number of really great financial podcasts out there, like the You Can Afford Anything podcast by Paula Pant. I listened to that one for a very, very long time. She's also really great if you want to invest in real estate. She has a course on that as well. And on YouTube, one of my favorite channels is The Financial Diet. They have a lot of really good, like basic money tutorials as well as a lot more advanced ones. And some of them are in like really nice little bite-sized chunks. You can like learn something new about money in like 5 to 10 minutes, or you can do a deep dive on one of their podcasts for like an hour. I really like them. They're very like kind of female focused and more like modern, which I really like. One of my favorite financial YouTubers of all time is Stacey Flowers. She has been documenting her journey of financial independence, financial freedom, paying down a shit ton of student loans for a few years now, and I've been following her for a few years now, and she's in a really exciting place. But she definitely knows how to pinch pennies, but she also talks a lot about the mindset about money and how you need to get your mindset right so that you can get your dollar bills right. Another YouTube I like is You Need a Budget. They actually have a budgeting software. I used it for a year. I don't use it anymore, but that was a really good place to start as well, especially for people with a varied income. Maybe not quite as varied as mine, but varied in general. So yeah, if you want to get better with money, you kind of have to start somewhere. The budgeting system that I have now works really well for me now, but it's taken me a few years of learning and evolutions and continuing to try new things and figuring out what didn't work so that I could figure out what did work. So if you try a budget and it doesn't work for you, don't beat yourself up over it. It's not your fault. Like, you just need to find something that does work for you. But finding a system that works for you is really critical, and reading as much as you can about it, or listening or watching. You just have to learn about money. It doesn't have to be a scary thing. It doesn't have to be an emotional thing. It is scary and it is emotional. But the more you know about it, I think the more power you can have over it. And money isn't everything, but it does help, especially in the society that we live in, unfortunately. So anyway, money is clearly a soapbox that I could talk about all day long. I don't talk about it very much on this channel right now. If it's something that you'd like to see more of, let me know. Drop any questions you have in the comments and I will do my best to answer them either individually or in a future video. It kind of depends on the nature of the question itself. But I hope that you've learned something. Maybe a new way to budget, maybe not, maybe just a new way to think about budgeting. And I appreciate you guys all for being here, especially this late in the video. But thanks for being my accountability buddies as I work towards paying off my mortgage as quickly as I possibly can on whatever income I happen to have on any given month. If you're curious about the other types of videos I have on this channel, again, for those of you who have not been here since the beginning, I have a podcast called Deliberate Living that I publish every week about how you can live more deliberately. I have interviews with people who are living deliberately alternative lifestyles, and I talk about specific subjects that people have questions on, like the logistics of living in a van and how much it costs and what kind of jobs you can do, etc. I also have a tour of my van if you want to see what else it looks like other than just this one window behind me. And yeah, I've got a few videos of the adventures that we've been on and how we got into this lifestyle. But if you liked this video, like it, subscribe, come find me on Instagram. That's where I hang out most of the time. And I hope you guys are having an awesome day and feeling at least a smidge more confident with your finances. Bye!